And
With one finger.
yeah, well, I think we can all play little bits of other instruments.
The Beatles. What? Everyone loves them, right? The undisputed champs, the band that changed music forever? Well, what if I told you that some of music's biggest names, true legends themselves, listened to the Fab Four and pretty much went meh. Or even worse. Get ready, because today we're looking at the surprising critiques from 6 icons who dared to suggest the Beatles were, one way or another, seriously overrated. It feels almost wrong to even hint that the Beatles weren't musical gods. Their songs are legendary, their influence is everywhere, and their fans cross generations. For decades, they've been the benchmark in popular music, bringing in countless new ideas and leading a massive cultural shift. But under all that Beatlemania and glowing praise, there have always been some who disagreed. And when those voices belong to other music legends, you can't help but listen. Now, not all of them actually said overrated. You don't find that exact word in many direct quotes. But their criticisms, the way they brushed off the Beatles, or flat out disliked their music or their massive fame, paints a fascinating different picture. These aren't just random internet trolls, these are artists who defined genres, sold millions of albums, and earned their own spots in music history. So, let's get to it. Who are these bold musicians who weren't scared to critique the darlings of Liverpool? First up is a man whose opinion truly matters in music, Quincy Jones. A producer, composer, and arranger with an incredible 28 Grammy Awards, who's worked with everyone from Frank Sinatra to Michael Jackson, Quincy is a living legend. So, when he gave his brutally honest take on the Beatles in a now famous 2018 Vulture interview, the music world pretty much lost its mind. Jones didn't just say they were overrated, he called them the worst musicians in the world. He went on, they were no playing motherf **** airs. Paul was the worst bass player I ever heard. And Ringo? Don't even talk about it. Jones even told a story about a studio session with Ringo Starr for his 1970 solo album, where Ringo supposedly fumbled a simple 4-bar drum part for 3 hours. According to Jones, they had to call in another drummer, Ronnie Verrill, to nail it. When Ringo heard the playback, he apparently said, "That didn't sound so bad," and Jones claims he shot back, "Yeah, motherf **** because it ain't you." Those are some harsh words, especially from someone like Jones. He basically trashed their core musical skills. You could argue it's just different musical backgrounds, Jones coming from jazz and R&B, the Beatles from rock and pop, but his comments were a direct hit on their playing. Though Jones reportedly later tried to smooth things over with Paul McCartney, saying his words were twisted, the original quote still sent shockwaves. McCartney, to his credit, seemed to laugh it off, but criticism from a giant like Jones had to sting a bit. Next on the list is the iconic frontman of the Velvet Underground, Lou Reed. A true pioneer of avant-garde and alternative rock, Reed was never known for holding back or going with the flow. His band, backed by Andy Warhol, explored much darker and more complex themes than the Beatles, and their raw sound was the total opposite of the Fab Four's polished pop. So, maybe it's not a huge shock that Reed wasn't exactly a fan of the Liverpool Lads. In a 1987 interview, later dug up and animated by PBS, Lou Reed was painfully direct, "I never liked the Beatles. I thought they were garbage." And he didn't stop there, adding, "If you say, who did you like? I liked nobody." Reed felt that his own band, the Velvet Underground, was on a whole other, much higher artistic level. He said, "From my point of view, the other stuff couldn't come up to our ankles, not up to my kneecap, not up to my ankles, the level we were on, compared to everyone else. I mean they were just painfully stupid and pretentious, and when they did try to get, in quotes, arty, it was worse than stupid rock and roll." For Reed, the Beatles seemed to stand for a more commercial, maybe even shallow, side of rock music that he and his band were actively fighting against. His put-down wasn't just a casual dislike, it was a complete dismissal of their artistic value compared to the groundbreaking, often edgy, work he was doing. Some might say it's a classic case of an artist with a strong independent vision refusing to praise the biggest band of the era. Others might call it sour grapes or just plain snobbery. Whatever you think, Reed's garbage comment is still one of the harshest critiques of the Beatles from another legend. Pete Townshend, the main songwriter and guitarist for The Who, is another giant of British rock. The Who came up around the same time as the Beatles and were often seen as rivals, offering a sound that was louder, angrier, and more openly rebellious. Townshend's criticisms of the Beatles were often more specific than others on this list, usually zeroing in on their recorded sound and musicianship when you picked it apart. In a 1966 interview, Townshend talked about listening to a Beatles LP in stereo, where the vocals were on one channel and the backing track on the other. His take on the instrumental side was pretty blunt, and when you're actually hearing the backing tracks of the Beatles without their voices, they're flippin' lousy. This suggests that, to Townshend, the Beatles' instrumental skills weren't their strong point, and maybe their songs really leaned on vocal melodies and production to work. It's worth saying that Townshend's views on the Beatles have shifted over the years. Some think his early jabs were just part of the rivalry back then, a young musician trying to make a name for his own band. He's also recognized their innovation and passion at other times. Still, that "flippin' lousy" quote has stuck around, showing a specific critique of their musicianship from one of rock's most exciting guitarists and songwriters. This rivalry even pushed McCartney to write Helter Skelter after reading Townshend describe a Who track as the loudest, raunchiest ever, wanting to create something even wilder with the Beatles. So, Townshend's criticism wasn't just a casual swipe, it was a focused technical jab from a peer who knew his way around rock music. Ray Davies, the brilliant mind behind the Kinks, another major band from the British invasion, also had a critical take on the Beatles, especially during their creative explosion in the mid-60s. The Kinks were celebrated for their uniquely English songwriting, their cleverness, and their social commentary, often setting them apart from the crowd. Back in 1966, Disc and Music Echo asked Davies to review the Beatles' brand new album, Revolver, an album most people now agree is a masterpiece. Davies, though, wasn't totally sold. He did like some tracks, calling I'm Only Sleeping a most beautiful song, definitely the best track on the album, but he tore into others. His most famous dig was at Yellow Submarine, which he called, "This is a load of rubbish, really. I take the mickey out of myself on the piano and play stuff like this. I think they know it's not that good." He also thought Eleanor Rigby sounded like it was made to please music teachers in primary schools, and said, "And Your Bird Can Sing" was too predictable. While his overall review admitted the Beatles were, as usual, strong performers and the recording was good, and he did find some things to like, his guts to call out specific, now classic songs as rubbish was pretty bold at the peak of Beatlemania. It just goes to show that even groundbreaking work like Revolver got some flack from respected peers who just had different tastes or artistic views. Some say his comments on Yellow Submarine were blown out of proportion by the press to reflect on the whole album, but the direct quotes on those individual songs are still out there. This one might come as a real shock, considering Elvis Presley was the king of rock and roll and a massive influence on the Beatles themselves. John Lennon famously said, "Before Elvis, there was nothing." But as the Beatles' fame exploded and their cultural impact grew, Elvis reportedly started to see them in a more critical, maybe even resentful, light. His sharpest criticisms weren't really about their music quality, but more about what he saw as their cultural influence. This all came to a head in a famous meeting with President Richard Nixon at the White House on December 21, 1970. According to White House memos and an aide named Egil Bud Crow, Elvis told Nixon he thought the Beatles were a real force for anti-American spirit. He reportedly said that the Beatles came to this country, made their money, and then returned to England where they promoted an anti-American theme. Elvis apparently believed their influence, along with the hippie counterculture and drug use, was bad for American youth. That was a pretty big statement coming from an American icon to the president. The Beatles had actually met Elvis in 1965, an encounter that was supposedly a bit awkward. Elvis's later comments to Nixon suggest he grew increasingly uncomfortable with the cultural changes the Fab Four represented. Paul McCartney later said he felt a bit betrayed by what Elvis told Nixon, especially since the Beatles looked up to him so much. It's a messy situation, maybe driven by some professional jealousy, genuine cultural worry on Elvis's part, or maybe he just wanted to get on the good side of the establishment. Whatever the reason, the king himself had serious doubts about the legacy and impact of the band that once worshipped him. Our last musician brings a different, and very serious, type of criticism, Charles Mingus. A hugely influential and groundbreaking jazz double bassist, composer, and bandleader, Mingus was a giant in the jazz world, known for his passionate, complex music and for always speaking his mind. His problem with the Beatles wasn't about their pop sound or their rock musicianship, but something much deeper, cultural appropriation. Mingus accused the Beatles of basically taking black American music, repackaging it, and making a fortune without giving proper credit or payment to the people who created it. He reportedly called them thieves and frauds for this. A specific quote often linked to him on this is, "For the Beatles to be able to come here and take all the millions of dollars away from this country by copying our own music and composers, selling it back to M and nobody even suing M yet." That's a heavy accusation, and one that's been part of music discussions for decades, not just about the Beatles. Mingus, with his deep roots in the African American musical traditions that gave birth to blues, jazz, and eventually rock and roll, saw the massive success of British bands like the Beatles, who were clearly influenced by these styles, as an act of exploitation. His criticism wasn't about whether their songs were catchy or well-made, but about the ethics of their success considering the racial and economic power imbalances in the music industry. For Mingus, it seems, the love for the Beatles ignored a fundamental unfairness at the core of their global fame. This view adds a really important and critical angle to understanding the Beatles' complex legacy and the music business as a whole. So, there you have it, 6 legendary musicians who, for all sorts of reasons, weren't drinking the universal Beatles Kool-Aid. From knocking their playing and songwriting, to worrying about their cultural impact and accusing them of appropriation, these artists give a surprisingly different take on the Fab Four. Were you surprised by anyone on this list? Do these critiques make you see the Beatles or their music any differently? Or do you think these legends just got it wrong? It's pretty clear that even the most famous bands in history get criticized, even by their peers. The Beatles undeniably changed music, and their influence is massive. But the opinions of people like Quincy Jones, Lou Reed, Pete Townsend, Ray Davies, Elvis Presley, and Charles Mingus remind us that musical taste is personal, artistic rivalries are a real thing, and it's always worth thinking about deeper questions of influence and originality. Maybe hearing these opposing views actually gives us a richer, more complete picture of the Beatles' place in the amazing, complicated story of music. What other musicians do you know who were critical of the Beatles? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this surprising, don't forget to like this and subscribe for more music stories that go beyond the usual headlines. Thanks for watching.